Really, as platform engineer specialists, we try to make accessing compute as easy as possible for anybody in a business that needs it. It used to be developers building microservices, but more and more with AI becoming relevant, to do your work, more people in the company need access to compute. If you look at all of the effort that's required in a company to produce that new value, our goal is really to create as much autonomy in the team that's focused on the business domain as possible so that it's as efficient as possible and as scalable as possible. Platform engineering actually treats the developers as the customer and tries to let them create their own environments and their own dependencies without waiting on another human resource. But actually what's required is the ability to manage the full life cycle of infrastructure without human intervention. So, a lot of effort has been put into software development in terms of continuous delivery, continuous development.
Yeah, and that has been the trend for the last 10 years.
10 years, 15 years.
Yeah.
And it's taken a huge amount of effort. And that's actually what's created a lot of the pressure on infrastructure teams.
To adapt. This episode is sponsored by Core Engineering Consulting Group. Welcome to another episode of Hack Cyprus. Today we have Joseph here with us from Core Engineering Consulting Group. Hello, Joseph.
Hey, how are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you very much for being here. We've been trying to arrange this for a bit. And I'm really excited to do this because we're going to talk about something fairly new and fairly modern, platform engineering and what you do there at CECG.
Yeah.
But before we go deep, tell us about the company. What do you do?
So CECG is a platform engineering company. So we offer bespoke consulting services, mostly focused on enterprise clients, helping them get more out of their engineers. So we help development teams go faster, safer, and do that in a scalable way. So that's really one way to look at it. I'll give you a second way. Really, as platform engineer specialists, we try to make accessing compute as easy as possible for anybody in a business that needs it. It used to be developers building microservices, but more and more with AI becoming relevant, to do your work, more people in the company need access to compute. So we try to make that interface as easy as possible. And that really for us is platform engineering and cloud.
All right. And how come you were based in Cyprus? I know you didn't start in Cyprus.
Yeah, so still most of our clients are based in the UK with some presence in the States. And a lot of our engineering effort actually happens in the UK. There's a few reasons that we wanted to do Cyprus. First, Brexit meant that we wanted to have an EU base. So, we needed to pick somewhere in the European Union. Cyprus was great from a tax and business perspective. From a personal perspective, I'm also, my wife happens to be Cypriot and I have 3 kids. And so from a timing perspective, it also worked. So everything was kind of lining up and pointed towards Cyprus. We were also at that time growing as a company very quickly to the point that recruitment was really challenging to find the right type of skill sets. And so because we are a specialist company, we didn't really want to lower the quality or lower the bar. And so training became an important part of our strategy. And London being a very competitive market, it's quite high risk to invest at the level that we wanted to and retain your talent. Yeah. So the view was in a market like Cyprus, we can invest heavily in the engineers that we bring in-house, invest in their training, offer them opportunities that were very competitive to the local market. So we retain them and create these long-term relationships. And so to develop a training strategy, it made more sense for us to do that here. But we're using the material that we've developed to also train everybody that comes into the company.
Okay, that's good. And how long have you been here now?
So, I always say it's been a year, but it's been 4 years since I've personally moved. And the company was established about 2 years ago in Cyprus, so the Cyprus entity. So as a business, this is year 5. So we're well into year 5 now as a group. Yeah.
So you can consider it a successful migration to Cyprus?
Definitely. It's been a successful migration. The office launch was really great. It was our first big physical presence where we could actually bring brand into like the real world. And so, that has kickstarted a lot of new initiatives and changed who we are as a company.
All right. And can you explain to me the services you provide in either in startups or in SMEs or even in corporate large-scale companies?
Yeah, so our offerings are divided into 3 main pillars. So we do bespoke consulting, which is really looking at a client use case specifically and creating IP that's theirs to solve their problems. And so that's bespoke consulting. Generally, that's been focused on enterprise because it's really more the frontier development that happens in that space. More recently, we've been investing in our own product. So Core Platform is an off-the-shelf developer platform that gives you enterprise-grade capability, except without having to do the whole development yourself, both initially and the maintenance. So it's really, can I get started straight away? And so that's really the product offering. That was intended initially for startup scale-ups and SMEs who wouldn't necessarily be able to afford the cost of building out a platform. But in practice, we've actually found that some enterprises that don't want to invest heavily in a platform engineering capacity internally are also happy to take that product offering. But so that's really a high value, low cost offering.
All right, subscription-based product.
So the third offering is a subscription-based offering.
Okay.
So and this one is really where you can get training, support, and research. And both these businesses, the product and the subscription support, is something that's come from client demand. So when it comes to the subscription offering, really we have a lot of clients that both before we start an engagement and after we finish an engagement want to continue having connection and contact with our engineers. It allows them to have fractional access to experts when they need it. It also allows them to continue to ask questions, and get daytime support without having to be in a daytime contract that's the same as a full-time engineer.
So you're buying essentially hours?
It's access in terms of Slack messages or ticketing. In terms of the research, it's getting access to blogs, white papers, and POCs that you curate as an individual. And so the research is another element of that support subscription. I can describe it. We're getting quite deep, quite fast.
Yeah.
But really, again, that subscription offering, the aim is to have a high value, low cost offering that's building on top of, a network effect. So if many people have common problems around platform engineering, we are often doing research. We're often doing spikes on new technology. That could take, 1 month, 2 months, or 3 months. Sharing the knowledge that's discovered about new tech that's constantly emerging. Obviously, if we do it for one, we can do it faster for the second. And so when somebody joins a subscription, it's about curating that research to your own problems. So
like a knowledge base of
it's creating a knowledge base based on your own problems. So, another way to look at it is if you think of a blog and then a white paper and then a POC as ever increasing amounts of effort, really you can say 1 week, 2 weeks, or 3 weeks of unplanned drop-in help from an expert to solve a problem or to get more information about a problem that you're having right now. And then at a bare minimum, you're going to get a hard asset, which is either a blog, a white paper, and or a proof of concept, but it's going to be about your area. Obviously, what's shared is, the generic information and not client-specific information. But it's important that curated research is really focused on solving real-world problems that clients are facing today.
So one client might have the same problem as another.
Absolutely, and that is a very common thing. And so if you imagine 10 clients subscribing to this, they might be paying cost plus pricing because, one of the benefits of anything that comes in community is all of our pricing is cost plus or as close to cost as possible. The reason that we're doing this is that we retain the IP on these articles and these investigations that we do. And that IP itself has value. And really by sharing that out across the common interests, everybody benefits. So you might be curating 10 articles yourself, but if there's 10 people in the network, you're benefiting, from 100. And so really for us as platform engineer specialists, we have an active interest in curating and generating knowledge around platform engineering. And we try to share that out to the community at an affordable price.
All right. It's a different style than anyone I've heard of.
That's another thing we are trying to do. We want to be an offer of one. We're not really trying to position ourselves and be better at something specific that someone else is doing. Because we've always been value focused, as in we need to identify the value we're trying to create for a client and show a measurable result. We're just trying to solve our own problems. And so, like I said, this community subscription is trying to answer the problem of how do I get, high quality information quickly. And so I can be responsive to my problems without paying for it. And so, we're trying to answer that. And really by doing small steps with clients that need it, we've been able to create a product that's actually been effective for them. So it's really the way we try to build our business.
That's why you were so eager to do videos as well, to share that information with videos as well.
Absolutely. I think, if we were going to ever think about doing video as a company, we try to prove that it's providing value for ourselves and our own engineers. So the main reason we wanted to do video was as a means of transmitting information quickly to a wide group of people. Most people are used to watching quick shorts.
Yeah.
We've already gone through a huge effort of documenting more formally and having wikis that define our processes, making that consensus based and owned by the teams. So it's been progressive levels of maturity on how to transfer information to the entire organization. I think videos is just that next level of maturity that we're trying to get to.
All right. Okay, let's go back to the basics then.
Sure.
Now that we know what the company does and what it differs from the rest of them. What is platform engineering that you guys are so focused on?
Yeah, so platform engineering focuses on creating autonomy in value streams in businesses. So if I go and try to define some of those things, so there's teams in a company that are creating value for that company based on that company's domain. For example, if I'm a video streaming business, I might want to create player features that beat, the competitors like Amazon Prime or Netflix.
Yeah.
And so
some kind of features.
Some kind of feature. And so that value stream team normally has dependencies. So maybe they depend on an infrastructure team to create environments for them before they could deploy their software that has that capability.
Yeah.
And so if you look at all of the effort that's required in a company to produce that new value, our goal is really to create as much autonomy in the team that's focused on the business domain as possible so that it's as efficient as possible and as scalable as possible. And so really, ideally, we want to abstract away the differences between, Amazon, Google, Azure, or potentially, cloud providers is one big thing where, being agnostic protects the business.
But it doesn't stop there, right?
It doesn't stop there. So it's really treating engineers as a customer. There's a simpler way to look at it. So platform engineering actually treats the developers as the customer and tries to let them create their own environments and their own dependencies without waiting on another human resource. So as an infrastructure engineer, instead of responding to tickets to create environments, I'd spend my time creating a capability that lets the end user self-serve. And so the biggest difference between DevOps, which tries to take the management of infrastructure and focuses on making it through code, platform engineering tries to take that one step further so that the capability that's created is offered through a self-service interface by the final user.
Yeah. So that, I would imagine, would revolve around a console, a developer console, right?
Potentially. But actually what's required is the ability to manage the full life cycle of infrastructure without human intervention. So, a lot of effort has been put into software development in terms of continuous delivery, continuous development.
Yeah. And that has been the trend for the last 10 years.
10 years, 15 years.
Yeah.
And it's taken a huge amount of effort. And that's actually what's created a lot of the pressure on infrastructure teams.
To adapt.
Because if you want to do a lot of continuous delivery for software, what did you need? More environments. Why? So you can do more testing, maybe in parallel. And so all of that requirement meant you needed more infrastructure. Now, if infrastructure was more of a manual provisioning task, it fell behind. So for the provisioning of infrastructure to become fully automated, you needed the same things to happen at a lower layer. So basically, instead of software delivery lifecycle, it's now infrastructure delivery lifecycle that we talk about within platform engineering. What are the tests? What are the gating? And can you have an immutable artifact like you would with software, but that represents the entire infrastructure?
To be progressed into production.
Exactly, to be progressed in production. So we set the same mission goals that the dev teams had, except at the infrastructure layer. So we wanted the ability to update every single one of our servers every single day. So in terms of, patching or anything like this based on cycles, that became almost a thing of the past because everything would need to be updated as soon as possible, or at least daily. And so I think the iceberg, that's the huge part of the iceberg that's underneath platform engineering, for me personally, is actually testing. And it's how we overcome the difficulties of testing infrastructure to the level that we want to.
Like we do in software.
Like we do in software, except when the tooling doesn't allow you to do so out of the box.
Yeah.
So
there are some tools there.
There definitely are, more and more so.
Yeah,
like more
but it's not really the regular approach somebody does when starting with infrastructure as code. I mean,
Definitely,
first they lay out the infrastructure as code. They try to be as much declarative as possible.
Yeah.
And testing doesn't even crosses their mind when they start.
Yeah.
But as you evolve, I guess the last bit that you need to ensure is that the environment you're going to set up, you're going to provision, is tested thoroughly, automated in an automated way, to be handed over to the developers. Correct?
That's correct. And then I would say that's the starting point, because then you ask 10 people whether they do testing, and you get 10 different levels of testing.
Yeah.
So, not all testing is created the same. And so even the idea of doing the testing at the end of the development cycle, we would try to shift that left or shift that as early in the development cycle as possible. Even, to the point where if you could write the test first, potentially, even for infrastructure. Yes, even for infrastructure.
Even for infrastructure.
Yeah, when appropriate. But really, for me, it's the frameworks that are there that says every time I build a capability, this is where I'm going to run my tests. And it's not only that I know that I need to run tests and I know where they're going to be. I also know that the tests are going to run in X number of environments. And those environments have a hierarchy between each other. So you mentioned dev, but we would have an environment that's before dev called pre-dev, because as an infrastructure team, we would treat dev as our first production environment. Because going back to one of the core principles of platform engineering for us, the developers are the customer.
Are the customers, yeah. So and the dev environment for you prod. Is
That's prod one.
Yeah.
And so
funny way of looking at it. Yeah.
100%, right? Because especially for the level of multi-tenancy that we normally aim for, we achieve at the enterprise clients, we have over 1,000 engineers that are actively using a single common platform.
So it's like a real user base.
100%.
Like a product that you ship out to the customers.
100%. And they're using it every day. Yeah. And so if dev goes down,
it's like a production.
Everybody can call block. Yeah, everybody can call block.
Yeah, I can relate.
Yes, and for that reason, pre-dev is an environment that we would use even before we touch the development environment. And that would be a long-living environment where we create simulations that make that environment look as similar to dev as possible. So if in the context of Kubernetes, we'd be creating and deleting environments regularly. We'd be onboarding and offboarding teams regularly. We'd be deploying new apps and deleting them regularly. And we'd be ensuring that the functionality that was put into place continuously works in that environment as we update it in place. So that is, the first place where we're doing, let's say, a deployed test, and we mature that capability over a longer period of time. So here we're getting slowly into the details of what testing can mean and the difference. For me, testing actually happens before any of the things that I just described. That would be, what I describe now would be promotions. We'd be promoting it from that pre-dev environment into the dev environment. Testing, I'd rewind all the way back to when I'm writing the code. So before I actually write the functionality, I would want to think about what are the metrics that would ensure that this functionality is working.
The definition of done.
The definition of done from the perspective of visibility and monitoring, right? So from the perspective of how can I see this from the outside working? So what are the metrics? What are the KPIs? What are the alerts?
And then when all the reds go green, then you have an environment.
Exactly. You have the capability completed. Yeah. And so that gets checked in at the same time and ideally versioned at the same time. So your metrics, the capability, the monitoring, the alerting, all of that is grouped up as one versionable artifact. And then that thing together gets promoted between these different environments.
It seems very hard to do this, though, in a packaged way.
And this is exactly why I'm saying.
That's why we need you.
Why it's not out of the box.
Yeah. Because all of these components might be very difficult to work with. I mean, and very different to work with. Like the monitoring would be one system. Kubernetes could be the other system. The actual applications that you need to deploy on it would be another. It's a lot of components and joined together to produce that artifact that...
Completely right. So I think I would say you want to distill it to the basics first, which is, we're just trying to manage change and risk through change. That's really what we're trying to do. So you ideally want to try it before you do it in the real environment if you can. Or if you're going into that real environment, you're trying to mitigate the risk. So you're going to go to a subset. And then you need something to validate that your change actually works. So tests. Yeah. So those are the fundamentals. The rest is like, how do I do it in this domain? So software has done a lot in terms of libraries and tooling and mocking to make that process easier. Obviously, in the infrastructure level, we're not there yet.
That's why the research and all the research that you described before,
Absolutely.
and the wikis that you describe now, because literally there's no one else, there might be no one else that has done that, whatever you are trying to do now.
Yeah, I want to take the credit on that level, but I would say the language that's around the people, that's around the behavior a group of people do is becoming more and more common. Now platform engineering, what does it take to do it? But I think, even an amazing sysadmin back in the day that was trying to not get it wrong twice will probably have had similar approaches in terms of test suites, the order in which things are executed. And so really that's why I'm saying, for me, it goes back to the fundamentals of what you're trying to do. So there's gating that's behind, tests. And so for me, I just don't want to accept no, as in if the tooling doesn't do it out of the box, can we engineer a solution around it? And so when we, for example, evaluate product, we will look at, how friendly it is from a programmatic perspective. Is there an API or just a UI? That's probably one of the most common, challenges within the infrastructure space.
Yeah.
Because it's heavily geared towards, making it really easy to use from day one, also focusing on the operator. And so, the UI age, I feel we're almost, I won't say past it, but we're definitely entering an age where API is required everywhere.
Yeah, and I think we already passed it because of the DevOps days, because everything was API back then, to be able to do it in pipelines and in an automated way.
I think for a lot of the tooling, yes. Definitely from the cloud provider perspective, all the integrations there, yes. But then when you're talking about third-party tooling
and monitoring and everything,
and monitoring and security, compliance, and we don't, without going into any specifics or names, but there are definitely big vendor products that are not API friendly or have been playing the catch-up game because now it's non-optional. And so, evaluating how easy it is to integrate with certain types of tools, the type of flexibility it gives you,
it's
how
important.
easy it is, to test, that's important.
Okay. This episode is sponsored by Code Engineering Consulting Group. CECG is a principle-driven strategic advisory led by expert engineers who have been at the forefront of platform engineering from the start. CECG empowers software development teams to achieve unmatched speed, security, and scalability while optimizing costs. So someone that doesn't know how to start with all this, and they've just been around the DevOps days, that they know CI/CD, they know infrastructure as code, but not everything are automated in the sense that you were describing before. How would one start to do what you're trying to say and to provision an environment from scratch and in an automated way to have an artifact that is deployable to dev for the developers to work with?
So how would they start? I mean, I guess that's a very big question. So it depends on who you're trying to serve. And I guess we can narrow it to like the context of Kubernetes, or if we even just like try to make it not technology specific, I guess the question I'd ask is, let me think about how to answer that question, because it's very, very wide.
Yeah. Let's think of it in a simple Kubernetes environment where you're gonna deploy something in a new environment for a developer to start doing a feature. It needs some firewall rules. It needs cloud provisioning. And
so it depends on how much you're willing to invest in the time, like, it
doesn't end, right?
It really, so if you look at ThoughtWorks, they say that platform engineering starts making sense, when you have 5 teams or more. I think that was the heuristic a while back, but, a lot of tooling has made it easier to get started now. Mm-hmm. I would say if you have more teams, it makes sense to focus on platform engineering yourself. If you don't have that many teams, there's nothing wrong with a more DevOps approach, as long as you're respecting, the principles of testing, trying to have immutable artifacts. And I really do believe in the difference between, CI and CD. So understanding the main difference between CI and CD and doing both of those. And I'm happy to go into the details of what I think both those are, for example.
Okay, maybe in a later stage.
Yeah.
If they stay on the CI/CD path that you're saying, and it's not worth for them to do all the platform engineering in depth, that would limit them from scaling, though, right?
The platform engineering is more about allowing that capability that you just invested in to be usable by many teams on a self-service way.
Yeah.
So if you really wanted to move in that direction, again, depending on, I would say for most people, it makes sense to leverage tools like Kubernetes, which already have a lot of the platforming capabilities built into it.
Yeah.
So in terms of, namespaces and the role-based access control boundary that you get around that, including, a network boundary.
Network isolation.
Yeah, there's a lot of principles that already just come ready for you out of that box.
Mm-hmm.
So I say the quickest way to get going for a team for a company that has more than one team might be to get a Kubernetes environment up and running, probably one of the provider hosted ones, and have a strategy on how to divide and segregate that cluster between the different teams.
Yeah.
And then I would say the next thing is agreeing as a company what it means to enter production. So actually creating a contract, just a visual contract in terms of a pipeline. So a team builds an artifact that then needs to go through these levels of testing. Maybe it's functional testing in an isolated way, performance testing in an isolated way, and then an integration test. And then it goes into a staging environment where it matures, and then it gets promoted into prod. That's like a very simple example of everybody agreeing to that contract.
Yeah.
Using that contract, you can go to all the units of the business that have an interest on how change is managed in production. So you can go to security, you can go to compliance or legal or change management and say, this is our intention on how we're going to make change. Is there anything that's missing, or do we need a security step
in the pipeline?
To add it into the pipeline or that contract?
Mm-hmm.
And so once you have this stakeholder blessed contract where you've gone to each of these stakeholders as their number one fan, trying to represent their interest using their language, and saying, yes, this will do everything that you want now. You as the person that's facilitating that task, that's trying to do this transformation, do the problem solving to make the pipeline clear and easy. Now you can go to the development teams with a carrot saying, provided we comply to this, there's no more change management. You can do deliveries automatically.
Seamlessly.
Yeah, seamlessly. And here's a bunch of tooling that we've made to make a bunch of these integration points easier. And so I think if platform engineering is done really well, you're trying to remove those barriers between the different stakeholders through automation and self-service capabilities, and coming to the developers, serving them with all this amazing capability because they're your customers. So I think that hopefully gives a better picture.
All right. One more question I have. How do you expect the developers, which is your customers, basically, if you perform platform engineering, to be able to deploy all these different concepts of infrastructure? I know you have some automated way of doing it, and you create essentially a way for them to be self-served. But how much do you expect them to know about the other stuff that they didn't before, like security, firewalling, networking, and the cloud platforms that they didn't know before? So how is that extra knowledge required to do the provisioning of an infrastructure be done by the developers themselves and be able to be self-served?
Yeah, so there's a few things there. So I guess first is like trying to reduce the amounts of specific information they need to know about the infrastructure. So they should only really be defining the things that are like within their domain or that they should have an influence on. And I guess as we get better, that might become smaller. But I'll give you, to make it more specific, if you're a software developer deploying an app, we could imagine that you would say for each unit of your service, for each replica, you define, the CPU and the memory. In theory, we might be able to predict that, but it's not there yet.
Yeah.
So we would be expecting, for you to say my service needs this much CPU and this much memory. Also for you to say, my service needs this many instances, as in I need 10 instances of my service to handle Y load, X amount of TPS. And so even to get to the point where you as a team can say that's what you need, you obviously need a development lifecycle that supports that. So when you come to apply it and to learn it. Mm-hmm. And so, for example, we have default pipelines. So I just described that contract previously. So we have contracts that we suggest out of the box, or what we would call paved paths. And so one of the reasons that we suggest doing performance testing for each of your microservices is so that you can accurately do right sizing and understand how your service scales with load. And so we would say actually it's the responsibility or the best placed to do that tuning is the development team that's writing the software, if they're doing it at the time that they're writing their software. So every time you make a code change, if I get benchmark results on what I do, how I'm handling 100 TPS, 500,
feedback.
Exactly, immediate feedback, 5 to 10 minutes. And so you've introduced something that's just affected the performance. And so you can go in and you can tune that. Or if you've exceeded the memory allowance because you've created a big map in memory, you're the one that's just done that, and your change will immediately show you
and
that.
The ownership would be...
Absolutely. So I'd say really the parts of the infrastructure that we're asking the developers to control are the ones that they're very much connected to. We're not asking them to choose the operating system to run Kubernetes on. We're not asking them to install Docker. We're not asking them to...
Or to write any Helm files.
Or to necessarily write Helm files. There, what I would say is we've tried very carefully, and we've learned this lesson the hard way, not to hide native interfaces wherever possible. So if Kubernetes, for example, provides the right level of segregation, and we want to offer capabilities that are beyond what Kubernetes offers, we prefer to augment the capability rather than hiding the Kubernetes interface and giving them ours, where we're all of a sudden, racing against Kubernetes to make everything we offer compatible with the latest capability. So I would say we try to let people use the native interface, or at least we give them access to it, but we give them tooling
around
that. And ideally, they're using our tooling because it's better, not because they have to.
Yeah. I think that's a lesson learned in the container orchestration wars we've seen. Everybody was trying to compete with Kubernetes, but eventually everybody adapted with it and develop tools around it.
Yeah, I think that definitely was a big lesson early on, and I think it's worked out.
Okay. Now let's change the subject a bit around Cyprus.
Yeah.
How do you see the tech landscape of Cyprus now that you've been here 4 or 5 years? Do you see potential in the tech ecosystem?
Yeah, I definitely still see potential, and especially for us as a company and with the goals that we have, I think engineers in Cyprus are going to work for us. It hasn't come without challenges for sure, and I'd say starting from a cultural perspective, but also like exposure to the approaches that we're used to seeing more in the UK, there have been differences. So I think definitely it's been a journey and a learning experience for us. What we've really learned from it is that training does matter, like being explicit about what's required and what our expectations are, and having a two-way communication with the team. And so I would say in the 2 years that we've been operating, we have actually exported a lot of our products that we've built in Cyprus from the training perspective, even to the point of selling them to our clients in the UK. Okay. And so Cyprus is definitely working. We're still hiring now, and we'll basically hire any engineer that we find that's the right engineer at the right time. So we haven't stopped hiring since we came.
Okay. Now, what do you look for when you're hiring? Do you have a hiring process?
This is where we have to be adaptable, because it depends on what we're finding. But historically, we've hired from both a software development background and an engineering background. But there has to be a willingness and a desire to use both, because ultimately we try to build software that helps us use infrastructure better. And so
it's a combination.
It definitely is a combination.
It's a weird. It's a new combination.
It's a new combination
of an engineer.
Yeah,
it's something like a DevOps engineer, but they must have some knowledge of software in order to write this.
Ideally, yes, and I think you can't solve it all the time by finding the perfect engineer or creating the perfect engineer.
That's why you have the training.
That's why we have the training, and that's why we also carefully select our teams or deploy teams in a specific way. And also, when it comes to platform engineering, one of the biggest efforts that we're doing as a company is creating our own core knowledge base. So we have a means of capturing, approaches and communicating them to the different consultants in our group, so that we're performing consistently and learning from each other quickly. So even if, the initial set of 6 guys that were amazing rockstar platform engineers, 5 years ago were killing it, we're not going to use the same information today. And so it's more the process by which we're learning from all of our experience. That's really what's driving the company today, I'd say.
And what do you see in the future? I mean, you've talked about AI.
Yeah.
How did AI change what you're currently doing and platform engineering in general from your experience?
Yeah, it's going to be a multifaceted answer. I think the base form is that, to do AI, you need compute, and a lot more compute's actually under demand.
That's why I think Kubernetes adapted to offering GPUs as well, and managing those GPUs instead of just computing power in CPU way.
Yeah, so back to the just accessing infrastructure, accessing different type of compute through the best interface. Well, Kubernetes is the best for now platform engineering interface out of the box, like from an open source perspective, at least in my opinion. And so definitely it makes sense that people are trying to use it to run all of their workloads that power AI capability. I think one of the biggest pieces to get AI right is to get your data right. And so we'd already been making a lot of moves towards supporting data pipelines out of the box, not just how to deploy microservices. And so I think that's one dimension where we're trying to get more and more mature. And actually, because we're working with enterprise clients that are also trying to find relevance in AI, everybody's trying to say, like, can I find that application that works for me? So we're being asked to get involved and help. And even when comparing which vendor products they might be interested in buying, they're also trying to compare that against the build versus buy. So like, what could we do with the investment that we've already done in platform engineering as a company?
To integrate everything together.
Because, the other dimension, or another way to answer this from a platform engineering perspective, is as a platform engineer that has control over a core platform or a central platform where all the observability data, you have access to, you have an opportunity to offer AI enhanced capabilities to all your tenants for free. So, if you can see everybody's logs, metrics, and you can then enhance and somehow have anomaly detection through observability that's offered just as being part of this platform. That's again trying to centralize an effort and create a capability that everybody benefits from.
Yeah, because you could train a model better than anyone else because of that data.
Without extra integration. Yeah. And you also have a lot of contextual information, because it's not just random people using random compute, departments, teams, app names. So you can add a lot of contextual information to the metrics and logs that you have access to without people having to do additional configuration. And so we're already working with several clients right now trying to flesh out their 2025 AI ops roadmap to see how they can best leverage the data that they've already been collecting for years and years.
Okay. And lastly, Joseph, I want to talk about how would you define the culture of the company? Would you say you're more of a startup, or and how are the engineers progress from being platform engineers to how can they evolve inside the company?
Cool. Yeah. So culture is definitely very important for us, and something that evolves and is owned by the people, I'd say. So the first thing is that we are an idea meritocracy, which really means that it's more important what the idea is rather than where it came from. And so we really value ideas by merit. But we're also a meritocracy where we really value results and we want to reward people for results. And so it's really about what you do. I think in the space of platform engineering, there's so much change that if you want to be a relevant, capable, or leading engineer, the requirement for learning is 100% there. That's just a fact, and we can't change it. And so if somebody wants to just stay where they are, they're actually going to be going behind. And so because there's a real requirement for continuous learning, we first try to create the space for it. We try to create the material and make people that are more senior available to help people with that. But we also expect people to invest their own time and have a growth mindset as an individual. And the reason for that is that it's really uncomfortable to be in the space if you're not. If you're not interested in always learning what's happening and getting ahead, there will be other people that are doing it more and getting more information than you.
That's the reality, right?
That's just the reality. So our positioning as a company is, well, what we can do is find the people that actually like that and want that, and do our very best to reward them heavily for that. And so we do have, sayings that we repeat regularly and have kind of come about. The first one is, come with a plan. And that really, for me, is about doing your homework, showing up, assuming that you are going to have an opinion, a direction that you could vouch for. And it means that you're not going to just wait to be told what to do. As a consultant, I think that's really important. But also in life, I think, it's important to think about what you can do to get yourself to that next step. But the next principle is really let the best ideas win. And that, ties into that idea meritocracy. So showing up with a plan doesn't mean that you're right or that you should do it your way. It's really doing your homework, but then listening to everybody else to let the best ideas prevail. So as a group, you come up with the best plan, everybody contributing, having their own plan. And really the next saying that we have is, do hard things often, which for us, even as platform engineers, we're looking for the tasks that are difficult, annoying, and really take a lot of time from developers, the toil. And by looking at that work that happens regularly and is annoying, but seeing it as a first-class citizen, you build strategic solutions to it. And that's really the beginning of platform engineering, continuously fixing the build, getting the environments to build faster. And so, doing those auxiliary tasks as a first-class citizen turned platform engineer, it turned that effort.
To make everything easier for the developers.
Exactly, to make it easier for the developers. So it's doing those hard things that developers didn't want to do.
Yeah.
And then the last one is really valued for what you do, which is what we mentioned. And I'll just say from a salary perspective, from what we're trying to offer people in Cyprus, but also in the UK, all of our perm employees, we try to be very transparent about our salary ladder. And so it's there, it's published. There's an expectation that people go and get promoted every single year, that they grow and get promoted every single year. And we create a specific plan for them, which we call the growth value strategy. Mm-hmm. And we upfront agree what is expected quarter by quarter, with a view that if you manage to complete that successfully, we want to promote you every year. So promotion isn't something that you have to figure out how to make it work or wait for somebody to retire.
It's clear.
It's very clear, because the business is built in a way that if you get promoted, you will be more valuable for the company, and we would be able to reward you more. And so we want people to get promoted. We want people to get better scores because we can place them on harder projects, place them on better assignments. And so for us, it's taken a lot of effort to try to design that system. And so far, again, it's one of those lessons that we had in these first 2 years in Cyprus that has really paid off for us. And to the extent that, our clients are also asking us to help them with their performance development plans for their own engineers and their departments as they grow.
HR consultants.
Well, it's important to be aligned. It's important to be aligned when you're trying to do difficult things.
Yeah. All right. I know for a fact that your offices are very cool, because you've hosted us a couple of times for our GDG sessions, and thank you for that.
That's all right.
I know that you've been very polite, very kind with the developer community. And I should say that you are the sponsor of this podcast as well. And you're also sponsoring the STEAM Academy by Girls in STEAM. And thank you for that. Nah. Okay, Joseph, thank you very much for being with us today. I mean, this has been very insightful. Yeah, platform engineering is a topic that I wanted to do an episode for the podcast. And I will see you in the next one. Thank you.
Thank you so much.